For example, they think that maybe you should have school holidays that are adjusted to Islamic calendar like Christian calendar. That's really dangerous. Really, really dangerous. I mean, after all, tolerance has its limits in the United States. And so and this goes out everywhere. These are the people who are protecting our liberties. Now, you might be reassured that Congress was holding this oversight hearing to prevent the fusion centers from getting out of control, like's happened to every previous effort to run spy programs, COINTELPRO. That was the effort to spy on Martin Luther King and all the anti-war movement in the 1960s. And then it has previous iterations, McCarthyism, whatever. Jane Harmon's there, and she's the chairperson, so she has those who are running the fusion centers there at the first panel. She says, and I had written an article that was published the same morning, questioning their fidelity to the First Amendment. How would they know what the First Amendment meant? They'd never received lessons or otherwise. So she asked each of these leaders of the fusion centers, do you respect the First Amendment? Mr. Fein says no. He says, of course we do. Okay. Do you do civil liberties training? Yes. Okay. Now, do you really get a lot of good intelligence? Yes. Okay. That's the end of the questioning. There's nothing further. That's oversight. I said, yeah, that's Dick Cheney told us he all respected our constitutional rights too. And that was the end of the question. This is oversight? This is oversight. Now, they did point out that after this particular intelligence report from the Fusion Center was distributed, they rushed down from Washington, had some from the Department of Homeland Security, giving them a lecture. Hey, you shouldn't do this. They didn't point out that, but no one was demoted, no one was reprimanded, no one lost $1, or what it was that you found wrong in the Fusion Center report that seemed to suggest that we're at war with democracy. If free speech is convincing people, it must be bad. And you can imagine that at the state and local center, they view anything unorthodox as suspicious. Because one of the definitions of terrorism we have in our U.S. Code is attempting to change government policy by intimidation or coercion, like marching, like protesting, sitting in the back of the bus. You really want to change the policy. Well, gosh, we don't want to do that. Or like Susan B. Anthony voting and getting arrested because she was a woman and couldn't go into the ballot. You might be a terrorist then, because you want to change government policy. Now, if we think of our own history and imagine the British having a fusion center, who would the first people be arrested? Boston Tea Party, you're out, man. No way. No way. Committees of secret correspondence, you're gone. Protest against the stamp tax, you're out now. You're revolutionaries. We can't tolerate this stuff. And that is the mindset of the empire. We've come to the perfect world. We don't want anything to be challenged. Anything that challenges authority is suspect because you might be a future terrorist, and therefore we want to spy on you and collect information, and what happens to it we don't know about. These state and local fusion centers are useful to the government in the sense that because it's not the federal government, there's no Freedom of Information Act, there's no transparency other than what leaks out into the press. Now, what I asked, someone on the committee panel asked, well, Mr. Fein, have you actually seen these fusion centers? And I said, well, no, but of course I didn't have to go to Guantanamo Bay to know that we were detaining lots of people there, given our process there, who were innocent, like the Uyghurs. I don't know, Uyghurs probably sounds very foreign to you. There are 17 inhabitants of northeast China who were protesting their oppression there, and we picked them up, and they were rotted 7 years in Gitmo. The government has now finally conceded that, no, they're not enemy combatants. They don't threaten the United States. They shouldn't have been picked up. But government says, you're illegal aliens. We can't release you. You came here without a visa. You didn't get a green card before we captured you and kidnapped you to take you here, and therefore you got to stay down in Guantanamo Bay. Now, Obama comes and says, okay, I'm new on the beat. We're going to change things from the Bush reign. So I'm going to keep them there, but I'm going to tell them they're not enemy combatants anymore. So you can imagine the rejoicing. Oh, God, this is great. At least we're not enemy combatants. We're still in cages. We can't have freedom, but we're not enemy combatants. We're so happy. This is a new era. New era. We just moved so far away from the old era. Now, and they should understand the privilege, because Obama has continued to call people at Bagram prison in Afghanistan enemy combatants. So the Gitmo people ought to be real privileged, because others still suffer that opprobrium of enemy combatant status. Now, what needs to be done, and this is the theory of my book, if we're going to restore what the Founding Fathers envisioned as a republic, we need to renounce all of this global military profile. We need to make defense defense. This idea that the best defense is a good nonsense, it may sound like a good slogan. It is absurd on its face. No, the best defense is defense. You don't run preemptive wars everywhere. Abraham Lincoln once put it when he was opposing the Mexican-American War, which was conjuring up this fear that the British or the French would have a monarchy in Mexico City if we didn't invade Mexico. He said, well, what will happen if you authorize preemptive wars is tomorrow. The president will say, Great Britain is going to invade Canada, and use that as the beachhead into the United States. And I'll say, well, there's no evidence of that. That's concoction. They'll say, well, that's tough for you. I see it. If you don't, that's too bad. And that's, of course, what happens when you change defense into offense. Then you can go anywhere, because anything is a conceivable threat. You can't live life having a zero-risk existence. And the Founding Fathers would prefer freedom than zero-risk existence. So we need to come back to true defense. Get out of NATO. NATO, by the way, Article 5, most of you would be stunned to know that we are now by treaty obliged to protect the likes of Croatia or Albania if they're attacked. Why are we are? And we're urging, Ukraine to come in. So if they have a dispute with Russia over Sevastopol, then we go fight for Ukrainians. What in the Constitution entitles the U.S. government to tell you ought to go die so a Ukrainian can be free from Russian oppression or whatever, assuming that would be true? You can volunteer, but where's that? Secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. That's what this country is about. This nonsense that we have is kind of a global obligation to go everywhere in defense of freedom, assuming that it is freedom, like Afghanistan, is counter-constitutional. It's not what the Founding Fathers wanted. I go back. What they said, we don't go abroad in search of monsters to destroy. When we acquired our independence, do you think we attacked the French Bourbon monarchy or the Ottoman Empire or the Russian Empire? We didn't even go to the aid of the South American colonies throwing off the yoke of Spain. We said, no, we encourage your freedom. We don't send our people abroad to die for your freedom. So defense means eliminating all of our treaties. We need to get out of the UN. We need to take all those defense resources and redeploy them in the United States. It means we can still have aircraft carriers, we can have spy planes, but everybody in defense is here for one reason: defend the United States from attack. And I would wager no country would attack us. We wouldn't be building up resentments abroad that come from occupying their land, from bombing wedding parties, because when you're going after al-Qaeda, there's intermixture of blending into civilian populations. The great resentments that build up because we have such double standards. In the war on terrorism, it's legal for us to kill them. If they kill us, it's murder. Could you imagine a legal regime that says, one party can try to kill the other, that's legal, but if they try to fight back, it's a crime? And, of course, people think, hey, that's not fair. You don't have to be a genius to understand, the wild irrationality of this is a legal regime that we impose on the rest of the world. So we come back and we have solely defense. We insist that only the Congress can take us into war. Only the Congress. And we need to vote out every member of Congress who wants to yield all the power to the executive. Said, we don't elect you there to be wallpaper. You decide things. We need to eliminate any presidential authority of privilege to keep information secret. If it has to be confidential to Congress, he can do it in covert sessions if you have particular manufacturing designs for a nuclear weapon or something like that. But the president should not be able to withhold anything from Congress whatsoever. Nothing. By the way, even George Tenet, former director of the CIA, acknowledged that leaks come far more out of the executive branch than out of the Congress. The executive branch is far more indiscriminate in leaking out classified information than the Congress is. And then we need to get back, we need to eliminate this concentration of power in the executive. We need to eliminate that concentration of power in the executive. None of this delegation of, both domestically and in foreign affairs. The Congress should be deciding, well, if there's to be a bailout, where the money goes. It isn't here, Mr. President, you just spend $1 trillion where you think it'll do good. It's the equivalent of the Congress enacting a law that says, President, write a fair Internal Revenue Code.